needed a lot more work. I mean, it felt like they released a 70% done game. And I did play it, and I only played it 2 or 3 times. I just couldn't do it anymore because it was not fun.
In the distant future, vampires rule the night, but their numbers are dwindling. One podcast is unlike all the others. Half human, half vampire. This is Lefty Speaks, the official podcast for Vampire Hunter D.
I think part of the problem with that is you're ahead of what your ambitions are ahead of the hardware capabilities. And we think today about the success of the iPad, that it revolutionized, personal device computing. Well, Microsoft actually came out with a PC tablet years and years before the iPad. But clearly, the fact that most people have no clue what I'm talking about until they go Google it will tell you the success of it. And, it's good idea, but you've got to have the right hardware and software. Everything has to be in place for it to work. It's kind of like now when Apple came out with the Apple Vision and all these XR and AR and VR headsets. There's reason to be hopeful about them in the future. Like I have seen some amazing concept work on it and detailed planning. I have been involved in work for creating AR content, but the hardware just is not there to support the ambition. And for people that have tried to put it in place, it's had that very clunky feel. And so I wonder if what got a lot of that transition from 2D to 3D in trouble is people's ambition and what their vision was not tempered by the tools that were available for its execution. And it's in my mind, it's kind of like trying to force a brand new video game to run on your computer that has a graphics card that's 5 generations old.
Behind,
It may
yeah.
still boot, but
That's what it felt like playing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your experience may vary.
Yep. And then you add a whole other layer, which is within the zeitgeist, right? The motivation for people to try it and
Mhm.
be patient with it is really not there yet. So it takes time for that, not only for the hardware to get up there, then also for people to get used to it and then want to adapt it
Mhm.
into their gaming system or into their lives. So, and we see that today with AI and all sorts of stuff, where the mass adoption takes a while to kind of harmonize with society.
Yeah, and when you see people with established YouTube channels decide we're going to try making AI videos too, and they have a video where the people have 8 fingers that somehow morph and disappear, turn into claws,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it just looks really bad and clunky. Again, it's one of those like, yeah, you're not ready for prime time.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, my favorite ones right now are the Yeti and Sasquatch videos on TikTok where they're
The fake
running
ones.
around with selfie sticks. I mean, oh my
Yeah.
god, they're so clever. But again, they're like what, like 3 to 6 seconds long and then just stuck together. So,
Mhm.
but it's kind of like almost like a new form of sketch
Mhm.
Yeah.
comedy. And I think I mean, there's innovative ways to do it. Use new technology, hopefully without, I don't know how much people are being ripped off. I mean, all that stuff, is trained on visual artists, traditional artists, writers. So, I mean, it's such a giant gray area right now. And
Yeah.
that's something, that type of technology is different from like the video game hardware technology we're talking about, because it doesn't, it's innovative from people, and they're making new systems rather than ripping off other people. So it's that's a whole other video.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think Squaresoft is the best example of people who knew how to implement the technology they were given. And I talk about the Final Fantasy. If you
Mhm,
look
Mhm.
at
mhm.
just so in the US on the Super Nintendo, it was called Final Fantasy 3.
Mhm.
But Final Fantasy 3 is actually Final Fantasy 6.
Yep.
They just didn't release the other ones in the States, right? So if
Yeah.
you look at how
It's
brilliant
so sad.
Final Fantasy Final Fantasy 6 or slash 3 was or is, and you
Mhm.
look at what they did in Final Fantasy 7. One is 2D with like that weird spinning pseudo 3D, effect that they use on the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis, right? But then you jump to the PS1, and Final Fantasy 7 really maxed out what you could do visually, and you had a team that understood. And any real game, I mean, old school gamers know what I'm talking about. When you
Mhm.
played Final Fantasy 7, that was an emotional experience. Like when, spoiler, when Sephiroth kills Eris or Aerith, depending on how you pronounce it, I actually felt that I got sad because I never felt sad when a video game character died, ever.
Yep.
But the trick was they were so smart to take the time to build that character up and make you feel for her and get to know her and love her
Yep.
and then take her away from you. And the rest of the game is really a revenge arc, with Cloud wanting to kill Sephiroth, but Sephiroth getting more and more powerful, you know. And I bring this up to say that you
Oh, good
can
lord, the
make the
church with the
transition.
flowers.
Yeah, oh my God, right? Yeah, right. And if you go back to that area, you can see her flicker. You can see her ghost for a second, and her ghost would go away, and I would be like, "Oh my God, she's back!" And then she's not, right? So I feel that you can pull it off, provided, and we talk about this all the time, you have the emotional beat to carry the story. The Vampire Hunter D game had no such thing, you know, and many of the Castlevania games don't. You're just happy to kill these monsters. But the moment you get the emotion involved, that's when the game transcends, and that's where
Yeah.
it lasts.
Yeah, I think it's one of those of, "What are you selling me?" And
Right.
I
Yeah.
think of the John Wick movies as an example, or the Expendables movies, where I think I've told this story so many times. I worked for Regal Theaters and their corporate office for a number of years, and it's Monday after Expendables came out, and a bunch of us had said we were going to go see it over the weekend, which it's kind of easy to do when you work for the movie theater corporation. You you don't have to pay to see movies. Um, and walk into our kitchen, and Paul, one of the VPs, were there, and we're talking about it, and he's like, this is what we were like. Hey, what'd you think? And it's you know it was not a good movie. It's like it's a bad movie, but I had a great time. It was exactly what it was selling you to be. It was just this action movie, guns blazing, minimal plot to hold it together, 5 seconds of supposed romance woven in. But it was a fun movie. The John Wick, this is what I'm promising you will get in the marketing and all the stuff leading up to it. You get to the movie, you got exactly what it promised you in the advertising. And so for what it was, it's absolutely spot on. You got your money's worth. And I'm glad that they were honest about it. They weren't trying to be that emotional cliffhanger that makes something, I think, a movie for the ages. Whereas if you look at something like A Schindler's List, that is a movie for preservation. Like, what that does to you on that emotional journey, or something like a Braveheart, that that has some gut-wrenching hooks to it.
Yeah.
Hmm. Especially
And
before Mel Gibson turned into a lunatic. But yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. um So to me, it's, if you're be honest in your advertising about it. So I did like that about, a lot of the old video games is they weren't trying to be pretentious. They weren't trying to be on a soapbox. And then you got some of them that I think weren't trying to be on a soapbox, but the technology expanded to allow some greater flexibility. Because can you imagine if they tried to cram the Final Fantasy VII story and everything about it into the original Super Nintendo or the original Nintendo?
Yeah, it's called Dragon Quest. That's what I don't know if you ever played the Dragon Quest games, but the character design is by Akira Toriyama, who did Dragon Ball. And the
Mhm.
Dragon Quest games have sold almost as much as Final Fantasy has in Japan.
Yep.
And those games are so, excuse my language, goddamn dense with like it's like it's like taking like all the Lord of the Rings books and putting them into a one video game because it's like all this you got to read pages, reams of just talk, blah, 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 and it's like they pop up and it goes on. So yeah, there is an example of that. It's called Dragon Quest. But you were talking about influences earlier, and one thing I had thought about, we were making comparisons between Alucard and Vampire Hunter D, but also
Mhm.
other Daywalkers, like, for example, Blade.
Mhm.
And I believe Blade was created in 1973 by Marv Wolfman and Gene Colan for Marvel. I think it was a
Mhm.
Tomb of Dracula comic. So in 73, I'm wondering where was Vampire Hunter D's level of development? Like what was the actual publishing date for the first Vampire Hunter D novel?
Hmm.
That's one thing I've been trying to figure out because I always get different information. 1983. Okay. All right. So it's like a 10-year gap between
Yeah.
Blade and the first appearance of D. Interesting. Okay. 'Cause I can't imagine those two being influenced by each other at all. Blade was around first, but I can't imagine Kikuchi saw Blade and was like, I'm going to turn him into like, a pale skinned, tall, like Italian model.
Yeah, because the no internet and the
Right.
fact that those comic
No
books
cross
never
culture.
made it
Yeah.
to Japan.
Right.
Yeah.
There was no selling of them, no nothing.
Yeah, even when I lived there, I had to go into a a very specific part of Tokyo, Ochinomizu, to where you could get kind of like American nerdy stuff, right?
Wow.
So they did have like Magic the card games,
Wow.
English version, and they did have some American comic books, but for the most part,
But
around the
when
rest
was
of
that
Japan.
date-wise?
94 to 98 was when I
That
lived
makes
there. So yeah, I mean, I bought a Japanese version of Dungeons and Dragons box set.
wow.
So, man, and they had the English version and the Japanese version, and of course, I already had the English version, so I bought the Japanese version. Then I used it to teach English sometimes, with
Nice.
some of my private students. But, yeah, I mean, it was so weird to see American style, flat, floppy comic books after living in Japan for 4
Right.
years to walk into a store and see them, and it's like, "Wait a minute, I'm paying, like, $4 for this?" I mean, it's like, "What?" Yeah, and then in Japan, you're getting, like, a whole book.
Hmm.
And sometimes if you go into used stores, you'd buy a whole stack. Like literally it'd be like, all right, so here's the whole storyline. And there'd be like 12 graphic novels saran wrapped together for
right.
like $12. And I was like, uh, one little floppy or a whole stack of reading material. Which of course, because I'm not a native Japanese speaker, took me a long time to read some of those.
Right.
So what you're
Yep.
saying is you got a very good, time to money value ratio out of it.
Damn
Absolutely,
right.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, I
and
bought
and it
the
helped. I mean, that's partly how I learned Japanese. I mean,
Mm.
obviously, real Japanese as opposed to what I learned at university. So,
wow.
was like Dragon Ball, and some of that's that was
The
uh
simpler stuff,
yeah,
right?
yeah, Dragon Ball was probably, between reading the Dragon Ball comic book manga and watching, like just having like Saturday, like 6 hours of Dragon Ball nonstop on television. Yeah, like putting in one of the VHS and just let it go.
And you have
Wow.
with Dragon Ball, you have plenty of time to look up what they said during all the screaming
Oh yeah,
periods.
yeah, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of that was, yeah. I mean, there wasn't, yeah. I mean, some episodes didn't have a whole lot of dialogue. It would just be flying around fighting for 30 minutes, you
Yep.
know?
Oh,
But,
what was it? I saw something the other day that the Goku versus Frieza final fight was almost 20 episodes long.
Yeah. You know what's
it
funny?
did take some getting used to.
Oh,
The the
when I lived
Japanese, animation, on TV, where a whole episode would just be they introduce a fight from the last episode. So you're starting out all the crazy faces, and they're ready to fight, and then it's the fight, and then the like round 1 is over, and you get round 2, someone has morphed into something bigger, and all right, and you thought they had defeated it. Nope. Next week you'll see round 2.
mhm.
It's like
It's
not
when I
much
lived in
story
Boston
progression. Yeah.
when
Yeah,
I
some
lived
of
in
those were a
Boston
lot of fun though.
Oh,
I'm really
they're absolute blast.
I'm
Absolute
really
blast.
glad we have them and to be able to look back on them. To me, in some ways, I kind of compare it to, we, because I'm a huge board gaming fan. Neil is clearly also one from when you can see the different parts of the backgrounds we've had. Uh, I think of it like I remember playing in high school Axis and Allies. And then Catan came out and played that, got the whole expansion set for Catan, played that. I'm glad it's still played to this day, but I'm also really glad that we have, I will call it, better, more developed games than Catan and some of the original things that brought in kind of the board game revolution. And I've talked with other fans of the Vampire Hunter D franchise that agree that, as we've read Kikuchi's works over the decades, the newer ones are some of the more beloved stories compared to some of the starting points. And I think that's something that's true to all of us as human beings, that if we're progressing, that if we're working, that if we're striving, you will improve. The work I did when I was 20 and 30, I dearly hope is not as good as what I'm capable of today, because
Yeah.
if the opposite is true of that, then what have I learned? What have I done? What have I applied to the proverbial self of the whetstone? And that's why I like being able to have a discussion like this, and I'm very grateful for Brandon for you sharing that article, and for believe it was Mandy doing that research, going back to
yeah.
get comments from some of those original creators of Castlevania, where they say, these are the things that influenced us in making these beloved games and stories and experiences. And Kikuchi has never been shy about the things that influenced him, of his love
Mhm.
of the
Mhm.
Hammer films and spaghetti westerns. And yeah, I would find it fascinating to, could we go back even further as we look at things that inspired them, some of the old European kind of folk tales and horror stories. Because if you look at the original, some of the Disney classics like Cinderella, if
Mm.
you look at the original, I guess you call it original, but it's the different branching versions of those stories out of Europe, the Hansel and Gretel and a
And the
lot
Brothers Grimm stuff too, yeah.
oh wow, are they dark? Holy crap. Do not go read those if you are not ready for a dark ride.
Well, yeah. I mean, and there's some really, I mean, fairy tales
Mhm.
that evolved. Like for example, Jack and the Beanstalk, right? I mean that you think of that, as a story that was created, in kind of like Renaissance Europe, but it actually dates back like 5,000 years in history, and so there's an entire study of studying fairy tales and stories like linguistics,
Hmm.
breaking the different pieces of the fairy tale down, and they've got I don't know, like 600 different categories, and so like having Belmont going into the Dracula's castle, is reminiscent of ancient mythological fairy tales and stories
Hmm.
that date 5,000 years, and these kinds of stories resonate with human beings in a very at a very core level. And I mean it's a fascinating. I forgot the name of that study, that specific studying of fairy tales, and they've got
Mm.
classifications. Like Jack and the Beanstalk is like FT 308 and FT 326 or something like that. I mean, very specific, and it's really a fascinating side quest. If you start Wikipedia, or or Chat GPTing the history of that stuff, it's a deep dive.
Yeah.
Very interesting, but it,
The,
it can it
mhm.
can eat a few hours. Yeah.
Oh
The
yeah.
trick is, you said, you mentioned that it's core to us, and it's really about the fear of the dark,
Hmm.
Yeah.
ultimately. And my overall personal, and it's just me, my personal interpretation of Vampire Hunter D was just the fear of mingling. Like it may have something to do with Japan post World War II, some xenophobic elements. Because to me, on the surface, it seems like people should just stay to themselves. Because every time we get mingling, monsters are made, and it's like post-apocalyptic, land where monsters are made. And I feel like the Dracula storyline in and of itself, as we talked about, is a sexual repression thing, but there's also a fear of the other that's built deeply into that. I think the Blade movie series, especially the first two, particularly the first two, only the first two, really delved into uh, the feeling of the other, the fear of darkness, you know, even embodied in Wesley Snipes' own skin. I mean, that takes it to a whole other level. But the fear of darkness, the fear of the other, the fear of the the next, you know, evolution. Who, like X-Men deals with, what are we going to become? You
Hmm.
know,
Yeah.
so I look at Vampire Hunter D, and you see the mutants, and you see him possibly being the next actual real form of evolution, of like the ultimate mingling between a powerful vampire and a human being, and taking it to the next level, like almost like you said, demigodish goddess,
Yeah.
and demigod esque, excuse me, and I think that's all built into it. And I feel like, going back to the idea of video games allow us to step into the role of the indestructible hero, into the role of the Ubermensch, or Uberwoman, whatever may be. But when you play certain games, you are literally God, because you are dispensing death or creating life, and that's all a part of. I mean, Castlevania deals with that a lot. Deals with that a lot too. But I feel that a lot of where we are right now in our storytelling is really making social commentary about very specific things. And the Vampire Hunter D world, Blade does this, and a few other horror franchises are really good at talking about, the other, the fear of the other, and how to deal with monsters in and of it. I mean, I think what was the latest one? The Resident Evil series.
Yep.
With Lady Demish, whatever Demika, whatever her name is. Like, she became the most popular character, but she's basically a Vampire Hunter D, almost like analog. You know, and it's just very, very interesting to see how it all plays out. And on a side note, for those who are comic book readers, I believe the way to save American comics is to publish them like Shonen Jump is published, where you
Hmm.
take all that month's books and put them all in one at with lesser quality paper. So you get, maybe it might be a X Bible that month, and then you have the Spider books, and then the Superman book, all of them in one volume, as opposed to countless, countless, countless floppies that have depreciating value, and and it's killing the retailer side of it and killing fan interest. So I just wanted to jump back to something when we were talking about floppies versus manga, because that's
Yeah.
my contention. Because I bought the entire Demon Hunter series in one box set. I got it at like what Anime Expo or LA, whatever the anime con in LA
Yep.
is. I got it there a couple of years back, and like Scott always talks about, you can get all this stuff in cellophane, like the whole arc, because they sell what's that, One Piece, the trillions of
Oh, good
Yeah.
pages of One
lord.
Piece.
Yeah.
But they sell them in these like chunks. I saw them at the conventions, and it was like 30 chunks. I wasn't buying any of it, but I
Yeah.
was like, at least you know what you're getting it all in that giant
Oh yeah. Oh, yeah.
block
Yeah.
carry
Yep.
like
Yep.
a cross on your back as you leave the convention.
Yeah. Yeah. So Davis Films, another property that we owned the live action rights to, was a Japanese manga called Gorogo 13,
Oh,
which,
right,
like
right.
One Piece, it's like it was. I don't know if it still is, because the creator passed away, but it was the longest ongoing manga
Wow.
series in Japanese history. And I kid you not, I probably have, I don't know, maybe 6 or 700 graphic novels, boxes of them, and I mean, there's just no way for me to read through them. Read through all of them. I mean, I read as many as I could. Obviously, again, for work. There's been, they've had 2 animated series, 2 live action feature films, that were Japan in Japan. But we were going to make an English version of Go to Go 13, and the deep dive I had to do for that. Oh my! And of course, I absolutely loved it because I was already a fan, because I'd already seen the Sonny Chiba Go to Go 13 movie, and I'd seen
Wow, nice.
the 2 animated series, and I think they've got 2 animated films as well. Um,
And
but
a
yeah,
classic Nintendo game.
yeah, yep, exactly. Yeah, yeah. The game, it's okay, but but yeah, I mean, talk about, yeah, volumes and volumes, and I totally agree with you. I mean, I've been getting a Vinland Saga, and the same
Mm.
thing.
Wow.
It's you get the whole, it's like a book. It's a good read, and you're not like 5-minute read and then waiting a month
Done.
for
Yeah.
another. It's like, it's just, I mean,
Yep.
even trade paperbacks that collect like 5 issues, uh, they don't suffice if you actually want to, you collect like 4 of them, and then you have a nice afternoon worth of reading.
Yeah, one of the things I find interesting about the difference between American comic books and manga, um, I I guess I like both, but for different reasons, and I dislike both, but for different reasons.
Mm.
And one of the things I really like about the American style comic books, and by extension, if you look at them, the Korean manhwa,
Hmm.
a lot of them are made as webtoons or web serials, and then by the time they're actually put in print form, it's closer to manga in thickness. But like a lot of, if you look back at Solo Leveling, it was originally a web serial at which
Yep.
are
Yep.
posted one chapter at a time for people that are unfamiliar with web serials. You can see an American example on a site like Royal Road. So I compare the way they're created to be very similar to the American, floppy comic book. You're getting one installation at a time,
Mm.
except that with most web serials, with the change in technology, particularly if it's just text, you can put them out as fast as you create them because
Yeah.
type, type, type. Manga, they've gone with traditionally a simpler art because it's black and white.
Hmm.
It's a little easier to put together, so you can do it faster. So for me, it's that question of, what story medium do you want? What do you think is better for your story? Like for us, we've chosen that we're kind of in between. I think going forward, we might be a little closer by comparison to the Korean manhwa for how we want to eventually get to publishing. But I like the American style comic book because I think it gives us a couple of things for art quality that we're not going to get
Yeah,
if we did the manga route. And I also don't want to try and redo what the mangaka for Vampire Hunter D has already done. That doesn't seem to make sense to me.
right.
And so if we make a full color version of the comic book and do that as an adaptation, I think that gets us far closer to making an animated anything, film, series,
Yeah.
than if we were
Yeah.
doing manga. Because I don't know about any of you listening to this, but I don't know how many of you would want a black and white animated series. There's a reason we rarely see black and white movie making anymore. We much prefer color for film and television. And I think in animation the same thing. So for us, I think the comic book medium, but with a little bit more manga influence included than you would normally see from the American comic book industry, is the right place for where we're wanting to go with this next adaptation for VHD.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
I'm sure there are going to be people who disagree with us, and that's part of the, I think, joy of creative expression. Not everybody's going to agree or has to agree. So long as I think the vast majority of us are on board with it and agree it's good, then awesome. I think that's the goal. Because if you try to make everybody happy, I think the best way
Yeah,
to make everyone
right.
miserable.
Yeah.
You succeed
Yeah.
in making no one
Well,
happy.
yeah.
Uh,
Well, I think
and
you really hit upon a good point, and that is that there are pros and cons, and obviously this is based on perspective, but there are
mhm,
pros and cons for both. And ultimately, uh, the story you want to tell, how you want to tell it, does affect the medium that you're going to use. And so I mean that's the same thing with with Japanese manga is
mhm,
they tell slightly different stories, and they have for a long time. You know, in one sense, in Japan, when I was a teenager and I went to Japan, at college, I saw adults reading
Mhm.
manga,
Yeah. Mhm.
and they were and my I was doing a homestay over a summer, and every single person in the house had their own manga that was for them. The housewife had her manga. The young the like the girl in her early 20s had her manga. The 12-year-old girl had her manga. The 6-year-old boy had his manga. Dad has his manga. They are and I mean, it was just totally socially accepted, that it didn't there wasn't any, scrutiny about manga or comic books. And I remember as a kid, I was in junior high and high school, I was physically attacked. I was, physically bullied. I had to fight people because they were teasing me and trying to take the comics from me, and all that crap. And it's just that, you know, so there's just the environment in which you're telling the stories can really affect where you're what type of comic book or what type of medium you want to present. And now we've got, digital things that really, the ability to distribute a comic book digitally as well also changes the game.
mhm,
So yeah, I mean, like you said, I mean, part of why they had black and white, wasn't I don't think necessarily it was about the skill it took, because a lot of times some of the most brilliant ink work, I mean, and the cinematography, cinematically, some of those comics, like you look at, like, especially like Kozuro Kami, the Lone Wolf and Cub comics.
Mm. Oh,
Some
yeah,
of
yeah,
those,
yeah.
the artwork in them, even though they're black and white, is absolutely brilliant, breathtaking.
mhm,
But you could, like you said, you could get it done a lot faster, and usually it was the writer artist was one, and it was being done all at once, practically.
yep.
Yeah,
and then
I
and
would.
then they
Yeah.
bam print it out fast, and suddenly the whole train has their you know has their version already
Yep.
out, already printed.
And I think
My
that
biggest.
oh,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead, Brandon.
No, I would say my biggest recommendation for manga, just to see it as a cinematic art form in itself, is to look at the Akira mangas. I mean, you can get
Yep,
them in.
Mm.
yep,
They have a box set. They've got they got a 35th anniversary box set, which is one of the best. You can still get it for $100,
yeah,
and it's hardcovers. So I strongly recommend that. I mean, the work that
absolutely.
Atomo did was astonishing. I mean, I just wanted to throw out an idea that kind of boomerangs back to our initial, topic for community building here. Is that I would love if people first read the CBR article that we've, posted before you listen to this. But this is at the end. But even at the end of this, whatever you listen, go read it. It's totally worth your time. It's a very well researched article. You can get links and find some cool Google searchable terms that'll send you down the Castlevania and Vampire Hunter D rabbit holes. Totally worth your time. The other thing I would suggest is if you have not played Symphony of the Night, please, it's on, I believe, on Switch, Xbox One, PS4 or PS5.
Yeah.
And what also would be really cool, I don't think we've done this yet. In fact, I know we haven't. Why don't we all share, for those of us who game, our gamer tags, our IDs on Xbox and the PS Network and Nintendo? So that way we can, you can drop it on your Patreon, we can drop it in the
Hmm.
Discord,
Hmm.
and that's a good way for us to start building our community, outside of just the podcast, but
Yeah,
also connect with each other in the games because I would love it if I logged on and I saw somebody from the Discord currently playing, they let you know what everybody's playing,
yeah,
currently playing a Symphony of the Night, and I have a Switch, I have an Xbox One, and I have a PS5. So, I'll drop my information in
yep,
the
yep,
Discords and stuff after this.
yep.
And I think it would be a great way for us to build our community out a little bit more and grab some new people too.
I absolutely agree with that. And we also haven't even touched upon the Castlevania animated series, which is a whole other awesome topic to talk about. How they
We
developed
should.
it, the influences,
Yep.
clear influences that we see from the Vampire Hunter D movies. I mean, there's again, that's a whole other series of episodes we could talk about because that how it came to be. I mean, Adi Shankar. I mean, Powerhouse Studio. I mean, like all of it. I mean, there's a lot to talk about.
The funny part was is after Castlevania came out, when I worked at Regal, um, this one of the partnership deals I made was with Discover Card for their rewards program, tying in Regal's um, distribution and ticket program with them. And one of the people I got to know at Discover, my main point of contact there, messaged me after Castlevania came out. She's like, "Hey, have you seen this?" "Yeah, why?" "Well, Adi Shankar used to work at Discover before his
Mhm.
family helped finance getting the Castlevania first for that episode, that, well,
Yep.
movie, however
Yep.
you want to think about it, made. And so I just it's sometimes it's kind of funny the small worldness of it all and how many people, regardless of their life, where they grew up, are fans of these things and be like,
Yep.
I want to get to make something out of this thing that I like. And yeah, to me that's part of the joy of life is seeing the diverse spread of things. And yeah, and if people wanna talk video gaming, hey, I'm all for it. Except,
Yep.
like I said, I haven't bought a console in years. So long as people are playing on Steam.
There's other
Yeah.
stuff you can play,
Oh,
man.
Well, I can be
We'll find
found as
something.
Super Neil on PlayStation.
Mine
yeah.
is Shadow Law, right? And that's like the W's the W at the end of Shadow Law and the W at the beginning of right are two W's. So it's Shadow Law and then WRITE. That's my pretty much universal username on Xbox and the PlayStation Network. I
Well,
forgot
we
what
need to
mine
hook
was.
up too. I mean, yeah,
Yeah,
this is a great idea. Uh,
yeah. I'll
Oh,
drop
good
it in
lord.
the
I have
when we
like
post
I
this.
think 3 friends total. On on PlayStation. I don't do a lot of group gaming, so
I
uh,
think my Steam tag is uh out of Samurai, the Seven Samurai, because that was one of my dad's favorite movies growing up. So I ended up making my Steam tag as that is kind of a memory of my dad, because that's something we used to do when I was a little kid, is watch old black and white Japanese movies together, like The Seven Samurai or Chushingura. So mine is Camby, or Cambay, as would be the more appropriate way to say it. But you know, hey, I'm Americanized at this point.
This was a great conversation. I mean, I can't wait till we get into the Castlevania animated series. 'Cause I got a lot to say about that.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Yeah.
Alrighty. Well then, thank you everyone for joining us once again. I wish everybody well, happy hunting, and literally quite so if you're out there playing some of these video games like Castlevania or Monster Hunter Wild or any of those. So, thank you all for joining us, and have a wonderful rest of your day wherever you are and whenever you've listened to this.
Hope to see you online.
Thank you for listening to Lefty Speaks, the official Vampire Hunter D podcast, hosted by Brandon Easton, Neal Fischer, and Scott McLean. This podcast is created by Unified Pictures and Nine Realms. Narration by Lauren Evallen-Muller. Recording and editing by Nine Realms. Produced by Scott McLean and Ian E. Muller. Based on the works created by Hideyuki Kikuchi. Happy hunting.